I was fired over Zoom, so I bought their domain name. It took exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds for Meridian Dynamics to destroy 5 years of my life. That's how long the Zoom call lasted when my boss, flanked by someone from HR I'd never met, informed me my position was being eliminated due to restructuring. Not laid off, not furloughed, eliminated. Like I was a line item on a spreadsheet someone decided to delete. My name is Olivia Chen. Well, Olivia Harrison now. I changed my last name after everything that happened. And this is the story of how I brought a multi-million-dollar corporation to its knees from my apartment using nothing but a laptop, some very specific knowledge, and the burning desire to make them pay for what they did to me. In the tech industry, there's an unspoken rule that the way you leave a company is almost as important as the way you join it. A proper exit involves meetings, knowledge transfers, farewell lunches, and at least 2 weeks of wrapping up loose ends. I got none of that. Instead, I got a calendar invitation at 8:45 a.m. on a Tuesday with the ominous title, Urgent Discussion from my boss, Vincent Walsh. I remember staring at that invitation while sipping my morning coffee, a small knot of anxiety forming in my stomach. Vincent never scheduled urgent anything. He was the type of manager who planned meetings weeks in advance and sent detailed agendas the day before. This was out of character, which is why I accepted the invitation with slightly trembling fingers. At precisely 9:00 a.m., I clicked the Zoom link. Vincent's face appeared, unsmiling, alongside a woman I didn't recognize who introduced herself as Tamara from Human Resources. I barely had time to say good morning before Vincent cleared his throat and began reading from what was clearly a prepared statement. Olivia, as you know, Meridian Dynamics has been undergoing significant strategic restructuring to align with our forward-looking business objectives. I didn't know that, actually. This was the first I'd heard of any restructuring. After careful consideration of our organizational needs and financial outlook, we've made the difficult decision to eliminate your position, effective immediately. The words hit me like a physical blow. My screen blurred slightly as my eyes welled up, but I fought to maintain composure. 5 years at this company. 5 years of late nights, weekend work, canceled vacations, and consistently exceeding my targets. Gone in seconds. Your access to company systems will be deactivated at the conclusion of this call. Tamara will guide you through the separation process and explain your severance package. Tamara took over, her voice a monotone, as she explained I would receive 3 weeks of severance pay, 1 for each year I'd been with the company beyond 2 years, and that I would need to return my company laptop and other equipment. I would receive a shipping label by email within the hour. Do you have any questions? She asked after finishing her script. I had 1,000 questions. Why me? What about the project I was leading that was due to launch in 2 weeks? Who would take over my clients? What about the junior staff I was mentoring? Instead, I asked the only question that seemed relevant in the moment. Can I at least say goodbye to my team? Vincent shifted uncomfortably. We'll be announcing the organizational changes later today. It's best if you don't contact anyone from the company directly. It can create confusion during transition periods. In other words, no. 4 minutes and 37 seconds after the call began, it was over. My screen went black briefly, then returned to my Zoom homepage. I sat there, staring at my reflection in the dark squares where my boss and the HR representative had been, feeling the shock slowly giving way to something else, something hot and sharp that settled in my chest. I tried to log into my work email. Access denied. I tried the company Slack. Access denied. The project management system. Denied. The customer relationship management platform. Denied. 5 years of my professional life, severed in less than 5 minutes. My phone buzzed with a text from Ria, my closest friend at Meridian. OMG, what's happening? Did you get fired? There are rumors flying everywhere. So much for the announcing later today line. Word was already spreading through the company grapevine. I texted back a brief explanation, then turned my phone face down on the desk. I couldn't deal with the flood of messages that would inevitably follow. My apartment felt suddenly alien, like I was seeing it in daylight for the first time. For the past 5 years, I'd left for the office before sunrise and returned after dark, especially during crunch periods. Now, here I was, unemployed at 9:05 a.m. on a Tuesday with nowhere to go and nothing to do. I should have cried. I should have called my mother or my sister or anyone. Instead, I made another cup of coffee and sat down at my personal laptop. Something inside me had shifted, calcified. This wasn't just about losing a job, it was about the callousness, the complete lack of basic human respect after 5 years of dedicated service. Vincent hadn't even looked me in the eye when he fired me. I opened a blank document and began to type. Not a resume or cover letter, but a list. A list of everything I knew about Meridian dynamics that others might not. The vulnerabilities, the shortcuts, the technical debt they'd accrued over years of prioritizing speed over security. The systems only I fully understood because I'd built them from scratch. You see, I wasn't just any employee at Meridian. I was the senior technical project manager responsible for their entire digital infrastructure. I had architected their move to the cloud. I had overseen the implementation of their customer portal. I had designed their internal workflows and knowledge management systems. I knew where all the bodies were buried, metaphorically speaking. And most importantly, I knew that their domain name was set to expire in exactly 3 months. The thing about domain names is that most companies set them to auto-renew. But Meridian had a peculiar setup, a relic from their early days. Their primary domain, meridiand.com, was registered under the personal account of the founder, who had left the company 2 years ago. In the transition, the domain management had been handed off to the IT department, but the registration itself remained under the founder's name with a company credit card attached for payment. I knew this because I had been part of the discussion about transferring it properly. I had flagged it as a potential security risk. I had documented the issue and submitted it through the proper channels. And it had been ignored, deemed low priority by the same executives who had just deemed me expendable. I checked the WOIS records. Sure enough, Meridian.com was still registered to Peter Calloway, the founder, with an expiration date exactly 3 months away. I smiled for the first time that day, not a happy smile, but the kind that might make someone take a step back if they saw it. I closed the voice search and opened a new tab. It was time to start planning. The first few days after being fired passed in a blur. I went through the motions of updating my LinkedIn profile, filing for unemployment benefits, and reaching out to my professional network. I packaged up my company laptop and other equipment and sent it back with the provided shipping label. I was a model of composure and professionalism. On the surface. Underneath, I was meticulously documenting everything I knew about Meridian systems. Not their proprietary information or client data. I wasn't interested in breaking the law. Just the architectural decisions, the technical shortcomings, the administrative oversights, the sorts of things any informed outside observer might know, but compiled in one place. I also set up alerts to notify me when Meridian.com came up for renewal, and I started researching domain acquisition strategies. A week after my unceremonious dismissal, I received a call from Ria. She had quit Meridian in solidarity, she said, but I knew it was more complicated than that. The restructuring had affected the entire department, with increased workloads for those who remained. Ria had simply been the first to jump from what she perceived as a sinking ship. "You would not believe what a mess it is there now," she said when we met for coffee. "Your projects have been divided among 3 different people, none of whom understand how anything works. The client portal crashed yesterday and stayed down for 6 hours because nobody knew how to properly restart the services." I sipped my latte, feeling a mixture of vindication and genuine concern for my former colleagues. "What about the Westfield launch? That was supposed to go live next week." Raya rolled her eyes. "Postponed indefinitely. Vincent told the client it was due to enhanced security implementation requirements, whatever that means. It meant they had no idea how to finish what I'd started." "How are you holding up, though?" Ria asked, her expression softening. "That was a really shitty way to let you go." I shrugged, aiming for nonchalance. I'm fine, updating my resume, talking to recruiters, the usual. That's it. You're not plotting some elaborate revenge? Because I'd be planning to burn that place to the ground, metaphorically speaking. I smiled and changed the subject. Ria didn't need to know about my plans. Nobody did. Over the next 2 months, I did actually look for new jobs. I went on interviews. I even received a couple of offers, but nothing felt right. The truth was, I wasn't ready to commit to a new position when so much of my mental energy was focused on my project. My mother started to worry about me. Olivia, sweetheart, you can't keep turning down offers. Your savings won't last forever. She was right, of course, but I had calculated exactly how long my savings would last, and I had enough to see my plan through. Just barely. 2 weeks before the Meridian domain was set to expire, I received an unexpected email from Vincent. The subject line read simply, "Checking in." My finger hovered over the delete button, but curiosity won out. I opened it. Olivia, I hope this email finds you well. I wanted to reach out personally to see how you're doing and to express again that the decision to eliminate your position was purely business, not a reflection on your performance or value. The truth is, we've encountered some challenges since your departure that have highlighted your significant contributions to Meridian. I'm wondering if you might be open to discussing a consulting arrangement to help us address some of these issues. Please let me know if you'd be willing to have a conversation. Best regards, Vincent. I read the email 3 times, each time feeling the anger in my chest burn hotter. After firing me over a 4-minute Zoom call, after cutting me off from saying goodbye to my team, after all that, he had the audacity to ask for my help? I drafted several responses, each more scathing than the last, but ultimately deleted them all. Instead, I closed my laptop and went for a long walk. Vincent didn't deserve a response, and more importantly, responding wouldn't serve my objectives. 5 days before the domain expiration, I checked the wait always information again. The domain was still registered to Peter Calloway, still set to expire on the same date. No changes had been made. Either Meridian didn't have a system in place to track domain expirations, or they thought the auto-renewal would take care of it. What they didn't know was that the credit card attached to the account had expired 2 months ago. I knew this because Meridian used a specific company card for all their online subscriptions and services, with a distinctive expiration pattern. I had used this card countless times to set up accounts for software and tools we needed. 3 days before expiration, I set up accounts with every major domain registrar. I funded each account with enough money to purchase the domain immediately. I configured monitoring tools to alert me the moment Meridian.com became available. And then I waited. The day of the expiration. I took the day off from job searching. I set up multiple screens in my apartment, each displaying different monitoring tools. I ordered in food, made a large pot of coffee, and settled in for what could be a long wait. Domains don't always become available immediately after expiration. There's typically a grace period, then a redemption period. But I was ready for any scenario. If Meridian caught the expiration and renewed, I had backup plans. If they didn't, I would be ready to pounce the moment the domain became available. At 3:17 p.m., my first alert pinged. The Weichoi's information had updated. The status had changed from active to pending renewal expiration. The process had begun. At 5:42 p.m., my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the area code matched Meridian's headquarters. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text arrived from the same number. Olivia, this is Vincent. We have an urgent situation and could use your expertise. Please call me back as soon as possible. I smiled and put my phone on silent. 2 days passed. My monitoring showed the domain moving through the expected post-expiration phases. Meridian had clearly realized something was wrong, but they were struggling to fix it. Their website was still up, but that was because the DNS records were cached. Once those expired, their website, email, and all connected services would go dark. I received 3 more calls from Vincent, 2 from numbers I didn't recognize but suspected were other Meridian executives. And finally, one from Tamara in HR. I ignored them all. On the morning of the third day after expiration, my most important alert triggered. Meridian.com had entered the pending delete phase and would be available for registration within hours. I positioned myself at my computer, scripts ready to attempt registration through multiple registrars simultaneously. This was the moment everything had been building toward. At 2:14 p.m., another alert, the domain was available. I executed my scripts. For a tense 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then, one by one, error messages appeared from most of the registrars. Someone else had beaten them to it. But not all of them returned errors. A confirmation email arrived from one registrar. Congratulations, you are now the proud owner of Meridian.com. I had done it. I owned Meridian Dynamics domain name. Within hours, as DNS caches around the world expired, Meridian's website began to disappear. Their email stopped working. Their client portal went offline. Their internal systems that relied on the domain for authentication began to fail. My phone exploded with calls and texts, not just from Meridian executives now, but from former colleagues and even clients who somehow had obtained my contact information. I continued to ignore them all. Instead, I got to work on phase 2 of my plan. I set up a simple landing page on the domain. Nothing flashy or vindictive, just a plain white background with black text that read, "This domain is undergoing maintenance. For inquiries, please contact domain admino meridiandi.com." Of course, that email address now came to me. Within minutes of the page going live, emails began flooding in. Clients confused about why they couldn't access their accounts. Employees unable to log into their work systems. Partners concerned about ongoing projects. And finally, an email from Vincent himself. To whom it may concern, this domain belongs to Meridian Dynamics, a registered corporation. Your unauthorized acquisition of this domain constitutes cyber squatting and potentially criminal interference with business operations. We demand the immediate return of this domain to its rightful owner, or we will be forced to pursue all available legal remedies. Vincent Walsh, Chief Operating Officer, Meridian Dynamics. I drafted a careful response. Dear Mr. Walsh, thank you for your email. I have legally acquired this domain through standard registration channels after it became available following the previous registrant's failure to renew. There has been no unauthorized acquisition or cyber squatting, as you suggest. I am open to discussing the transfer of this domain to Meridian Dynamics under appropriate terms. Please let me know if you wish to pursue this discussion. Regards, Domain Administrator. I didn't identify myself. I didn't need to. Vincent would figure it out soon enough. The response came within minutes. We are prepared to pay the standard domain registration fee plus a reasonable administrative fee for the prompt return of our domain. Please provide transfer instructions immediately. I laughed out loud at this. They thought they could get away with offering me a reasonable administrative fee after what they had done. I believe you misunderstand the situation, I replied. This is a valuable digital asset with established traffic and business connections. Its fair market value significantly exceeds standard registration fees. If you're interested in acquiring it, I would be happy to entertain serious offers that reflect its true value. Then I turned off my computer and went to bed, sleeping better than I had in months. The next morning, my inbox contained a variety of increasingly desperate messages from Meridian executives, along with dozens from confused clients and employees. I sorted them methodically, responding only to non-Meridian senders with a simple message directing them to contact Meridian support through alternative means. I wanted to cause problems for Meridian, not for innocent clients and employees caught in the crossfire. By mid-afternoon, I received what I had been waiting for: a formal communication from Meridian's legal team. Dear Domain Administrator, I am writing on behalf of Meridian Dynamics regarding the domain meridian.com. We have reason to believe that this domain was acquired with the specific intent to disrupt our clients' business operations, which may constitute tortious interference and cyber squatting under the Anti-Cyber Squatting Consumer Protection Act. Before proceeding with formal legal action, We invite you to discuss an amicable resolution. Our client is prepared to offer $10,000 for the immediate transfer of the domain. Please respond within 24 hours to avoid escalation of this matter. Sincerely, Barbara Livingston, Legal Counsel for Meridian Dynamics. Now we were getting somewhere, but $10,000 wasn't nearly enough. Not for what they had put me through, not for the 5 years of my life I had invested in their company, only to be discarded in 4 minutes and 37 seconds. I replied, "Dear Ms. Livingston, thank you for your communication. I appreciate Meridian's interest in acquiring this domain. However, I must respectfully decline your offer of $10,000 as it significantly undervalues this digital asset. Based on industry standards for established business domains with existing traffic and business relationships, a more appropriate valuation would be in the range of $250,000. I am willing to negotiate in good faith and can provide a secure transfer upon agreement of terms. Regards, Domain Administrator." The response was swift. "Your counteroffer is extortionate and reinforces our belief that this domain was acquired in bad faith. We are prepared to increase our offer to $25,000 as a final good faith attempt at resolution before pursuing legal remedies." I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I let them sweat for 23 hours before replying, "Ms. Livingston, while I understand your position, I must disagree with your characterization. This domain was acquired through entirely legitimate means after it became available due to the previous registrant's failure to maintain registration. As for valuation, domains of this nature have sold for significantly more than even my initial asking price. However, in the interest of resolution, I am willing to reduce my asking price to $200,000. I should note that I have received inquiries from other interested parties, including some of Meridian's competitors who recognize the strategic value of this asset. I would prefer to conclude our negotiations directly, but I do have a fiduciary responsibility to consider all serious offers. Regards, Domain Administrator." This was a bluff. Of course. I hadn't received any inquiries from competitors, but Meridian had no way of knowing that. And the threat of their domain falling into a competitor's hands would be far more frightening than any legal action they might threaten me with. The next response came not from the lawyer, but from Vincent directly. "Olivia, we know it's you. Let's stop playing games. What you're doing is illegal, and you know it. Return the domain immediately, and we'll forget this happened. Otherwise, you're never going to work in this industry again. Is that what you want?" I had been waiting for this, the moment they dropped the pretense. But Vincent's tone, the threat, the attempt to bully me even now, it only strengthened my resolve. "Vincent, since we're no longer pretending, let me be equally direct. What I've done is completely legal. What you did, firing a dedicated employee of 5 years over a 4-minute Zoom call with no warning, no transition period, and no professional courtesy, was perfectly legal too. Funny how that works. As for never working in this industry again, I should remind you that I built half the systems your company relies on. My professional reputation speaks for itself, as evidenced by the chaos Meridian has experienced in my absence, even before losing the domain. My price remains $200,000. This is non-negotiable. You have 48 hours to decide before I entertain other offers." Olivia, I expected more threats, perhaps even the beginning of legal proceedings. What I received instead was an email from Peter Calloway, Meridian's founder and the original registrant of the domain. "Olivia, Vincent reached out to me about the domain situation. I wasn't aware of how they handled your departure. That's not the company culture I tried to build, and I'm sorry you experienced that. I'm not involved in Meridian's day-to-day operations anymore, but I still care about the people there, especially the rank-and-file employees who are just trying to do their jobs. They're the ones most affected by this situation. I understand your anger. I'd probably feel the same way, but I'd like to find a resolution that doesn't hurt innocent people. Would you be willing to meet with me to discuss? No lawyers, no Vincent, just us." Peter. This was unexpected. Peter had been a good CEO during my early years at Meridian. He was fair, transparent, and genuinely seemed to care about his employees. His departure and Vincent's subsequent promotion had marked the beginning of the company's cultural decline. I agreed to meet Peter at a neutral location, a quiet cafe halfway between my apartment and his office. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. He stood when he saw me, offering a tentative smile and a handshake, which I accepted after a moment's hesitation. "Thank you for coming," he said as we sat down. "I ordered you a latte. I remember that was your preference." The fact that he remembered such a small detail about a mid-level employee from his former company was exactly why people had respected him as a leader. "Let's cut to the chase," I said, not wanting to be swayed by nostalgia or Peter's undeniable charisma. "You want the domain back?" He nodded. "Yes, but I want to understand your perspective first." Vincent gave me his version of events, but I'd like to hear yours. So I told him about the 4-minute Zoom call, about being cut off from saying goodbye to my team, about the projects left hanging, about the consulting requests that came weeks later with no acknowledgement of how inappropriately they had handled my termination. Peter listened without interrupting, his expression growing increasingly troubled. "That's not how we built this company," he said when I finished. "That's not how anyone should be treated, especially not someone who contributed as much as you did." "And yet, that's exactly what happened," I replied. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I can't undo what Vincent and the current leadership did, but I can tell you that they're learning a harsh lesson right now about the importance of treating people with respect and dignity." "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" "No," Peter said. "Nothing I say can make up for how they treated you. But I'm hoping we can find a solution that addresses your legitimate grievances without causing further harm to employees who had nothing to do with the decision to let you go." "You mean you want me to accept less than what I'm asking for the domain?" Peter leaned forward. "What I'm suggesting is a different kind of resolution. Yes, Meridian needs their domain back. But what if, instead of a straight purchase, we structure it as a consulting contract? You return the domain, and in exchange, you receive a 1-year consulting contract at $150,000, plus a formal apology from Vincent and the executive team for how they handled your departure." I raised an eyebrow. "A consulting contract?" "For digital asset management and infrastructure security," Peter said with a small smile. "You'd be required to provide actual consulting services, but on a limited basis, say, no more than 10 hours per month. The rest would essentially be compensation for the domain and for the unprofessional way you were treated." It was an interesting proposal. The total amount was less than my asking price, but the structure would look better on my resume than "held a company's domain hostage." And the formal apology would provide a certain satisfaction. "And if I refuse?" I asked. "Then Meridian will likely proceed with legal action." Peter said frankly, "They might win, they might lose. Either way, it'll be costly and time-consuming for both sides, and the only people who will benefit are the lawyers. Meanwhile, employees who had nothing to do with your termination will continue to suffer the consequences." He was right, and I knew it. As satisfying as it had been to throw Meridian into chaos, my quarrel wasn't with the rank-and-file employees. It was with Vincent and the executive team who had treated me like I was disposable. "I want the apology in writing, and I want it distributed to the entire company," I said. Peter nodded. "I think that can be arranged. And I want a reference letter from you personally, acknowledging my contributions to Meridian and recommending me without reservation." "Done. And I want Vincent to deliver the apology personally, face-to-face, not over Zoom." Peter hesitated for the first time. "I can't promise that. I don't have the authority to make Vincent do anything, but I can strongly encourage it, and I can make it clear to the board that resolving this situation amicably is in everyone's best interest." I considered this for a long moment. The truth was, I was tired. Tired of the anger. Tired of the vigilance required to monitor the domain and respond to emails. Tired of putting my life on hold for revenge. "I need time to think about it," I said finally. "Of course," Peter replied. "Take 24 hours. But remember, this offer comes from me personally, not from Meridian's current leadership. I can't guarantee they'll agree to these terms if they decide to pursue other options. I left the cafe with mixed feelings. Part of me wanted to hold out for the full $200,000 and the satisfaction of forcing Meridian to pay through the nose for their callousness. Another part recognized the wisdom in Peter's proposal. It gave me most of what I wanted without dragging out the conflict indefinitely. That evening, I received an unexpected call from Ria. "I just got laid off," she said without preamble when I answered. "What? Why?" "Cost-cutting measures," she said bitterly. Apparently, the domain situation has cost them several major clients. They're in full panic mode, slashing expenses wherever they can. I felt a twinge of guilt. My actions were having consequences beyond Vincent and the executive team. "I'm so sorry, Ria. That's awful." "Don't be sorry," she replied. "I was planning to leave anyway, but here's the thing, I'm not the only one. They've laid off almost 15% of the staff today, including some people who've been there since the beginning. This wasn't what I had intended. I'd wanted to punish Vincent and the company leadership, not cause a mass layoff that hurt the very people I'd worked alongside for years." "Have you heard anything about the domain situation?" Ria asked. "Everyone's talking about it. There are rumors that a competitor bought it, or that it was some kind of corporate espionage." I hesitated, then decided to trust her. It was me, Ria. I bought the domain when it expired. There was a moment of silence. Then Ria burst out laughing. "Oh my God, that's brilliant. That's absolutely fucking brilliant. Wait, is that why they've been trying to track down your contact information? Vincent has been pestering everyone who ever worked with you." "Probably," I admitted. "Look, I didn't mean for people to lose their jobs over this." "Don't you dare feel guilty," Ria said firmly. "This is on Vincent and the board, not you. If they hadn't been such assholes to begin with, none of this would have happened." After we hung up, I sat in my apartment thinking about Peter's offer and Ria's news. The situation had escalated beyond what I had anticipated. People were losing their jobs. People who had nothing to do with the decision to fire me. I made my decision. The next morning, I emailed Peter accepting his proposal with one additional condition. Any employees laid off as a result of the domain situation would be offered their jobs back with back pay for any missed time. His response came within the hour. "I'll make it happen." 2 days later, I sat across from Vincent in a conference room at Meridian's headquarters. Peter was there too, along with Tamara from HR and Barbara Livingston from the legal department. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Vincent looked like he hadn't slept in days. His normally immaculate appearance was disheveled, with dark circles under his eyes and a coffee stain on his shirt collar. "Thank you for coming in today, Olivia," he began stiffly, clearly reading from a prepared statement. "I want to formally apologize for the manner in which your employment with Meridian Dynamics was terminated, the lack of proper notice, the abrupt nature of the Zoom call, and the prohibition on communicating with your colleagues were all handled inappropriately and did not reflect the value of your contributions to this company over the past 5 years." I watched him carefully as he spoke. There was no real remorse in his eyes, just the desperate look of a man being forced to eat crow to save his own skin. "Furthermore," he continued, "I acknowledge that the subsequent request for consulting assistance without addressing these issues was insensitive and unprofessional. On behalf of Meridian Dynamics, and myself personally, I offer a sincere apology and a commitment to improving our offboarding processes in the future." When he finished, there was an awkward silence. Everyone looked at me expectantly. "Thank you for the apology," I said finally. "I accept it, with the understanding that all laid-off employees will be offered reinstatement as agreed." Vincent's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "That process has already begun." The rest of the meeting was given over to the lawyers, who reviewed the consulting contract and the domain transfer procedures. By the end of the day, Meridian.com was back in Meridian's control, and I had a signed consulting contract worth $150,000, a formal written apology, and Peter Calloway's personal reference letter. As I left the building, Peter walked me to the elevator. "You know," he said quietly, "what you did took courage and intelligence. Those are valuable traits that Meridian clearly failed to appreciate. I smiled slightly. Thank you for helping to resolve this. Peter, I know you didn't have to get involved. Sometimes the right thing and the practical thing align, he replied. Besides, I built that company from nothing. I couldn't stand by and watch it implode over something so preventable. The elevator arrived, and I stepped in. As the doors began to close, Peter held them open for a moment longer. By the way, he said, I'm starting a new venture. If you're interested in a real job instead of just a consulting gig, I'd love to talk about possibilities. No Zoom firing, I promise. The doors closed before I could respond, but I found myself smiling as the elevator descended. It wasn't the vindication I had originally sought, but it was something better, a path forward. Over the next few months, I fulfilled my minimal consulting obligations to Meridian while exploring options for my next career move. True to his word, Vincent had offered reinstatement to all the laid-off employees, though many, including Rhea, had already found positions elsewhere. The formal apology had indeed been distributed company-wide, leading to a flood of supportive messages from former colleagues who were as appalled by my treatment as I had been. Vincent's reputation within the company was irreparably damaged, and 6 months later, I heard from Rhea that he had been promoted to a nebulous strategic role with no direct reports, effectively sidelined. As for me, I eventually took Peter up on his offer and joined his new startup as head of technical operations. The work was challenging, the culture was supportive, and I had a level of autonomy I'd never experienced at Meridian. But more importantly, I'd learned something valuable from the entire ordeal. My worth wasn't determined by how a company treated me, but by how I chose to respond. I could have let Meridian's callous dismissal break my spirit. Instead, I had found a way to stand up for myself, to demand the respect I deserved. And yes, I made absolutely certain that our domain registration was in proper order, with multiple safeguards against expiration. Some lessons, once learned, are never forgotten. It's been 2 years since the day I was fired over Zoom. Since those 4 minutes and 37 seconds that changed the course of my life. Sometimes I think about how differently things might have turned out if Vincent had simply treated me with basic human dignity. If he had given me proper notice, allowed me to transition my projects. Let me say goodbye to my team. Meridian Dynamics is still in business, though they never quite recovered from the domain debacle. Their stock price took a hit. They lost several major clients, and their reputation for technical excellence was tarnished. Last I heard, they were courting acquisition offers. As for me, I've moved on. Peter's startup was acquired last year for a sum that made my equity stake worth considerably more than the 200,000 zlotys I had demanded from Meridian. I'm now a partner in a technology consulting firm, where I get to set the culture and ensure that no one ever experiences the kind of dismissal I endured. Sometimes people ask me if I regret what I did, if I think my response was disproportionate or unprofessional. I always give the same answer. I regret that innocent employees were temporarily affected by my actions. But I don't regret standing up for myself in the face of corporate callousness. I don't regret showing Meridian that employees are human beings, not just entries on a spreadsheet to be deleted when convenient. The tech industry has a short memory for failures, but a long one for innovation. Few people remember or care about the Meridian domain incident now. What they remember is the successful projects I've led, the teams I've built, the solutions I've architected. My professional reputation recovered quickly, bolstered by Peter's unwavering support and my own demonstrable skills. There's an epilogue to this story that I rarely share. 6 months after joining Peter's startup, I received an email from Tamara, the HR representative who had been on the Zoom call when I was fired. She had left Meridian too, it turned out. I've been wanting to reach out for a while. She wrote, "What happened to you wasn't right, and I was complicit in it. I should have pushed back against the process, advocated for treating you with the respect you deserved. I didn't. And I've carried that regret with me. I'm writing not to ask forgiveness, but to let you know that your stand changed things. After you bought the domain, I started questioning a lot of the practices I had been enforcing. It led me to leave Meridian and find a role where I could actually build humane HR policies rather than just implementing the cost-cutting directives of executives who've never had to fire someone they respect. Her email affected me more than I expected. It was validation, yes, but also a reminder that systems are made of people. People who can choose to perpetuate harmful practices or work to change them. I've thought a lot about power in the years since. Who has it, how they use it, and what happens when the seemingly powerless find unexpected leverage. Meridian thought they held all the cards when they fired me over Zoom. They never imagined that I might find a way to shift the balance. That's the thing about the digital world we've built. It's complex, interconnected, and sometimes fragile in ways that aren't immediately obvious. A single overlooked detail, like a domain registration set to expire, can become a point of vulnerability. A seemingly small oversight can have outsized consequences. I don't define myself by what happened with Meridian anymore. It's just one chapter in a much longer story. But it taught me something important. Your value isn't determined by how others treat you, but by what you know, what you can do, and what you're willing to stand for. In the end, I didn't just buy a domain name. I bought myself something more valuable, the knowledge that I wouldn't let anyone dismiss my worth again. Not for 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Not ever. Last week, I was interviewing candidates for a senior position at my firm. One of them had recently been laid off from a major tech company, one of those massive rounds of cuts that have become all too common. She was clearly still processing the experience, alternating between trying to project confidence and showing flashes of the hurt and anger underneath. It makes you question your value, she said toward the end of our conversation. When they can just discard you like that, with a form email and an automated system that locks you out of your accounts before you've even finished reading the message. I looked at her resume again. Impressive skills, glowing recommendations from previous managers. The kind of candidate any tech company would be lucky to have. I do know, I told her. But here's what I've learned. Your value isn't determined by how a company chooses to end your employment. It's in what you build, what you know, and who you help along the way. I hired her, of course. And when she started, the first thing I did was show her our domain registration system, with its multiple safeguards, monitoring alerts, and redundant renewal processes. Seems like overkill for a domain name, she remarked. I just smiled. Trust me, some things are worth protecting properly. She'll never know the full story behind that statement. And that's fine. Some lessons you hope others never have to learn firsthand. But I'll always remember those 4 minutes and 37 seconds that changed everything. And the 3 months of planning that followed. I'll remember the moment when Meridiandy, calm, became mine, however briefly. And I'll remember Vincent's face when he was forced to apologize, to acknowledge that I wasn't just a line item on a spreadsheet. I was a person who deserved respect. In the tech industry, there's a saying, it's not the fall that hurts you, it's the landing. Meridian let me fall. But I found a way to land on my feet, and in the process, I taught them a lesson they won't soon forget. My name is Olivia Harrison now, and this is how I took control of my story.